And welcome to another edition of the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. It's always an interesting time when we can speak with our guests on various issues that affect Trinidad and Tobago, our society, and our objective is always to have an engaging and interactive as well as civil discourse, and in so doing help develop a culture of peace and understanding through constructive dialogue and, yes, citizens' participation. Our guests are persons who express views, opinions, and perspectives of their own, and sometimes may not necessarily be that of the FBN network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. Our topics are also wide-ranging. Discussions at times may be emotionally charged, but surely we can always find common ground and learn from each other, irrespective of our differing views. Now, despite measures by the state to introduce budgetary zero-rated costs on some basic food items, many persons in Trinidad and Tobago continue to complain about the rising cost of food. The naked truth is that the vulnerabilities of families have been made more glaring if one is only to measure by the increased levels of social support during the pandemic. Now, in a recent Guardian newspaper article, it was said that just when you thought inflationary pressures brought on by rising food prices could not get any worse, comes news that the cost of cooking oil, for example, has increased globally and is likely to impact the pockets of local consumers. It continues by saying the higher prices are likely to have a domino effect or impact, with struggling households likely to pay more for precious commodities and some businesses being forced to absorb part of the higher costs. It is also worthy of noting that the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Food Price Index averaged 135, that's 135.7 points in January, 1.1% higher than in December. The Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago also warned that higher prices, particularly imported inflation, will pose a challenge to the local economy in 2022. In outlining the outlook for this year in its January economic bulletin, it said that the international shortage of shipping containers, higher shipping costs, freight and insurance are expected to persist within or into the early months of this year, and alongside some pressure on prices of international agricultural commodities. There are some very important questions we want to address at this time. What can local businesses do to arrest the volatility in the market, disrupt the negative impact on social consumers, local consumers of food in Trinidad and Tobago? What are some of the factors impacting food inflation? How do we treat with what is called price gouging? And how has online shopping impacting consumers' tastes and choices and purchasing patterns? Well, this evening, or at this time, on the Citizens Community Forum, I want to welcome to the forum Mr. Rajiv Diptee, President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Diptee, welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you, and good evening, Stephen Cummings, and thank you for having me here on the show.
Right. It's a pleasure to have you here. This is your first time on the forum, so again, we always give our guests a special welcome in this regard. And we want to have we want to see if we can treat with some of those burning issues, front burner issues, as it were, as it relates to our topic this evening. Mr. Diptee, my first question to you, I mean, you are in the hot seat. You have been forced to respond to many questions and issues that affect food prices and consumers and what have you. But I wanted to sort of if we can address a couple of matters in the public's interest. My first question to you, what do you think local businesses can do to arrest what I call the volatility in the market and by extension disrupt the negative impact on local consumers of food in Trinidad and Tobago?
It's a question that has many innuendos, many things that we've discussed ad nauseum in the past, even initiatives that we could have brought to bear in the prior period to COVID and it's an issue that many an administration has pondered and will ponder for some period of time. The reality, as I put it to our people, is that as long as we are not growing it, as long as we are not manufacturing it, as long as we don't control the inputs for production, the inputs for processes of production where agro-processing and other manufacturing processes take place, then we will always be fetching those prices on the international world market where commodities, inputs, and finished goods are, when we talk about those things. The reality is that while we do support the local manufacturing sector, we see that the inputs for production are all imported, and we're all staring down the barrel of a foreign exchange situation that is not getting any better.
Yes.
And that really first and foremost is the elephant in the room when we consider
Yeah.
the prices of food, because what we experienced during COVID is that when COVID started, what local companies have with their foreign suppliers of goods, we call those our principals. Those principals, we would have credit relationships with them. But with the advent of COVID and the demand side of the equation going up and the supply side being constrained, those principals have demanded their foreign exchange payment first, payment upfront. So we've had to establish credit relationships with existing partners, establish new relationships with new partners. And that foreign exchange crisis is not just about food, it's about pharmaceuticals, it's about vehicles, it's about inputs for construction, it's every sector that's demanding the foreign exchange. So when we look at the food import bill, I think it's somewhere between $5 to $6 billion.
Yes. Yeah, and has been increasing Yes.
And will continue to increase as the prices internationally of foods go up. And I think while we have this conversation, let's be cognizant of the fact that it's an international food price phenomenon worldwide. So, when I talk to other BSOs, business sector organizations within the region, for example, in Guyana, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Barbados, we're having the same conversation about what can we do, not just as a nation, but as a region, to see how we can pivot to a place to create an appetite for local consumption.
Right.
And we always find it challenging when we sit down at the table, because we've created and fed a culture that's more sensitive to the import consumption because of the foreign brands we push, because of the things that we put out on the shelf. In the world of the supermarkets and in the world of consumers, those goods that we consider fast-moving consumer goods, those are the goods that have the highest rates of turnover in every category, in every variety, in every lane in the supermarket. So when we talk about cereals, when we talk about beers, when we talk about jams, jellies, when we talk about milk, butter, we think about things the consumer dictates which ones are the ones they will find on the shelf, because they are the ones that have been purchasing it ad nauseum. And we've noticed that even as some of the price points continue to rise, we ask ourselves, what's the window? Because we try to work with the price sensitivity of the disposable income that our consumers have. We have to work with the different strata of the people that's going to come into the store.
All right. Before you continue, Mr. Diptee, I wanted to just go back on that issue of foreign exchange and the availability of foreign exchange. Now, I remember the finance minister saying that there was some $500 million being put into the system, and that was probably about a year or two ago. That probably may have come just after the announcement, may have come just after one of the budget presentation. Do we still have a foreign, in 2022, probably late 2021, do we still have a serious foreign exchange problem in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, we do. And I will explain. So the allocation that I believe you're talking about, Stephen, is, I believe, one that is given to Exim Bank to support a core food basket of items. So when COVID would have come about, the Supermarket Association was involved at the level of the subcommittee with trade and agriculture. And we would have made recommendations. Listen, this is the core food basket of items. We look at rice, flour, sugar, toothpaste, toilet paper, all the things that we consider essential for the foreign exchange allocation.
Mhm.
As far as I'm aware, that prioritization was passed on in 21 and subsequently in 22 to for Exim Bank, with whom I still enjoy a good relationship.
Mm.
But
Mm.
Exim Bank would then prioritize the local importers or the local companies that would receive said allocation out of the out of the sum total allocated from the Ministry of Finance. That said, that does not cover. In my opinion, I should say, I don't believe that it's enough cover for all the local suppliers and distributors
Mm.
at a certain level, because they would find themselves, what COVID has done and what the foreign exchange crisis has done is that it will drive some companies into different spaces
Yes.
or altogether out of business, because if you can't have foreign exchange to facilitate the imports and the credit relationships, you need a certain quantum to stay head above water, so to speak,
Right.
metaphorically.
Okay.
And that continues to be a challenge. So
Right.
what you might find at the level of the grocery when you come in is that you will see a product or a variety within a category of product disappear altogether. That's
Okay.
because instead of buying maybe 5 or 6 lines of the same item in different varieties and SKUs, you may now see 3, because I've decided to, listen, I'm going to prioritize this and I'm also
Right.
going to prioritize that, but I'm going to cut within the brand or the portfolio of products that I'm carrying. So
Okay.
you will see attrition from that side.
Understood. Understood. Because we are looking at the factors. What are some of the factors impacting on food inflation? And we just like to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic at this time: factors influencing the food supply chain. A response from local supermarkets. I have with me Mr. Rajiv Diptee, President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and Stephen Cummings. So that we have a problem here, Mr. Diptee, and as we continue with the discussion and as we deepen the discussion, there's also the accusation that comes of some persons, whether unscrupulous or whatever term that you may want to associate them with. The issue of price gouging is a term that we hear quite often, and especially during a time of a pandemic, we've heard the comments that some unscrupulous traders deliberately go into the business of price gouging and those sorts. But of course, we do have in the regulative bodies we have the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the other bodies. Are you satisfied with the regulatory framework that would seek to, or that the mandate is really to protect consumers and especially the vulnerable?
Okay, so I'm very glad that you asked me that, Stephen. So, we always hear stories of price gouging. Sometimes they originate on social media. And sometimes, it's one of those things where in the age of the smartphone, they tend to go viral very quickly, be it
Yes.
on WhatsApp or Facebook. Price gouging, synonymously sometimes used as price discrimination. When we look at what's taking place, it's important at this time to remind everyone that not all supermarkets in Trinidad and Tobago fall within the network of the Supermarket Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's because we have high internal rigorous protocols and adherences to our procedures, because
Yes.
any member who is found guilty of price gouging will be expelled. And that is something that we're very, very strict about. So when an incident, or I should say an allegation of price gouging takes place, what happens is that at the level of the association, we do investigate it. We also are aware that where price discrimination takes place, there's also the Fair Trading Commission, because price discrimination could happen at the consumer side from a supermarket or supplier. So
Yes, as well. Yes.
right. So that's where the Fair Trading Commission comes in. The Consumer Affairs Division would be where the customer who goes to a retailer, that they would. We also invite anyone who experiences an incident of price gouging, in their opinion, to send us as much documentation as possible. And this is where it really gets granular for me, because I ask for as much supporting information as possible. I said, if you have video evidence, if you have a receipt, if you have the time, the date, if you remember anything at all, and in most instances, I can't get any of that when I do ask for it. I want to support them fully. What I do push down, Stephen, is that we have many strong institutional brand names within the Supermarket Association.
Yes.
You've got chains like Massey Stores, JTA, Extra Foods, Possad's the Food King. Then you have strong community independent supermarkets like the Price Club, SNS Possad, you know, and these are strong names in their community.
Yes, strong brand names, yes.
But I want to throw out an example here. If they take advantage of, let's say, something like bottled water or toilet paper or Lysol in a pandemic, it's going to become a viral issue, because then the customers will out them on whatever forum they want to.
Indeed, yes.
And then by damaging the institutional credibility of those strong reputations, the long-term cost is not in keeping with what the store is trying to achieve. So when I hear of delinquency and price gouging, for example, let's go back to the start of the pandemic, and we all know what happened with Lysol.
March 2020, yes.
Yeah, and that's the most popular example I like to use, because we saw the price of Lysol literally double and triple, and in some cases, I told the stores privately at that time, I said, we know what we're buying Lysol for, but we cannot explain that to the customer, that this is why the price is what it is.
Yes.
I said, I advise you all to stop selling it at this time. And they all did. Because it was a situation that would have created a perception that price gouging was taking place within the industry. Because sometimes on the supply side, a consumer would not understand why the price of a product went up on the international market for it to jump to the prices
that they have to pay. Yes.
I tell the stores, when it gets to that point, you may want to consider discontinuing the line altogether, because the price point has now slipped beyond the
So we have price gouging. There's also the term of hoarding, as well. I'm sure that you would have gotten complaints, reports, concerns as well. How prevalent is that?
So they're very, as I say, we have a strong social media presence, because the engagement with our customers is so important, as do many of the brands within the association. We also have a website where we encourage feedback mechanisms for reporting, and we also do feedback with the Consumer Affairs Division and occasionally with the Fair Trading Commission.
Right. So there are systems in place. Yes, you have.
There is a system in place, and we occasionally, a very good example too, and I want to remind people that the Ministry of Trade and Industry does carry a consumer shopping basket where prices are posted quarterly, I believe it's quarterly, on their website.
Posted on the website, yes. Consumers can check and cross-check the prices as against what they're seeing at other shelves, yes.
Yeah, because the food inspectors do come inside the stores and they do check the prices, and then this is produced for a publication that is posted onto their website. So that's another form of checks and balances taking place. But going back to your question about the reports, when I do get the reports and then I ask them, can you substantiate with with assisting me with supplying me with a video, supplying me with your receipt? So most of the time, in truth and in fact, Stephen, I just get an allegation of something like they took advantage of me, and
there's no evidence. Yeah.
So when we ask them for the things, that's when we're not trying to frustrate you if you feel you had it, but we need to run due process.
Well, as a responsible association, Mr. Diptee, you would want to substantiate these claims, and something that would go way beyond just mere an allegation. So one understands that, but I wanted to also treat with this issue of online shopping and its impact on consumer tastes and choices, purchasing patterns. What have you been seeing in the last probably year or two? I know that this is a trend that would have started even before the pandemic. This new craze about online shopping. What are you sensing in terms of patterns, and is it that we are seeing more of that happening in the e-commerce area, as opposed to the traditional consumer who would probably prefer to just walk into the supermarket and make a purchase?
I appreciate the question. It's a good one, especially given that the world, and I mean, look, we're on a technology platform right now that probably a lot of people didn't know about prior to COVID. So from that point of view, from the point of consumption, what we see with customers is that when it comes to groceries, the short answer is that they prefer to come inside the stores
Okay.
when they are shopping. The the supermarket is a recreational experience for families.
Mm.
It's an experience that people have actually been, taken for granted, just much like the cinemas, much like the restaurants, much like the nightclubs, much like the bars, because it's a heart and a hub of a community. It's the beating heartbeat of a community.
And
And most
could be an opportunity for family time as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's something where mom and dad bring the kids. They look at the cuts of meat, for example. They look at the blocks of cheese. They might go to the bakery section. The kids might want something there because there's a lot going on in a supermarket these days. There's fancy,
Not just mere shopping.
yeah, there's
Yes.
patisserie, there's an ATM at times. There could be a lotto booth.
Yes.
It really depends on what they're going there for. But we have a-
Pharmaceuticals, yes, pharmaceuticals. I think that is one that's been added in recent times as well. You can walk into a supermarket and get your pharmaceuticals.
so you
As in
have-
the case of massy stores, yes.
Yeah, and you have different strata of customers. You have the month-end shopper, you have the fortnightly shopper, you have the daily shopper, the guy who's going to come in there, he's going to buy one or two things every day, and he's always just going to, go. But there's different strata of customers that come to the supermarkets. The people, what we have tended to see during COVID in particular, is that services such as food drop and those app-based solutions for restaurant foods have actually been more prevalent
Okay.
and actually been more successful than the groceries. Now, that's not to say the groceries didn't try to create app-based or digital solutions. There were a few. There was WhatsApp
Right.
group chat. There was actual app-based activity by both the largest chains in the country as well as smaller third-party based solutions. But what they found is that the cost, both to the provider and both to the store, if I'm having to pack groceries for a guy or a family, the thing about it is that sometimes they aren't satisfied with the peculiarities of the product. Sometimes the cost is too much. The cost is not available to the average customer because if you're buying $100 worth of groceries, typically there's a 15 to 30% markup for the packing, delivery, transport
Service, yes.
of those goods. So and in this day and age, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have a motoring public that's very vibrant, unlike the other islands.
Mobile as well, yes.
Mobility is not short in this country.
Yes,
There's a corner shop really nearly everywhere now.
Right.
So
Because the question, has to do with whether the traditional way of shopping, if we are losing that, to another way, because and again, probably impacting on supermarkets in terms of sales revenue, because it might be easier for someone to just go online and make a purchase as opposed to physically going into to a shop or corner shop, as it were. But as you said, you're saying that we have not actually been we have not actually lost that because of the benefits, family time. There's a variety in terms of choice and what have you.
If you look at the most successful app-based solutions, I think that actually KFC is the most popular because they've incentivized the use of the app by giving you goodies and incentives to order through the app.
Yes.
I think that Price Smart Trinidad and Tobago has done something like that. We don't represent Price Smart, of course, but they are frequently overlooked as the biggest provider of warehouse shopping and club membership in the country.
Could we see? Yeah, could we see? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could we see in the very near future, if it hasn't already started, Mr. Diptee, that we may have maybe I would say maybe a 70% shift in terms of what how consumers act in terms of their preference, because we have the issue of crime, we have the issue of the pandemic, we have the issue of COVID-19. Is that something that you're seeing in the future, that there may very well be a shift, from the traditional to what we have today? We've been talking about the single electronic window, digitalization, e-commerce, e-government. Is that are you seeing that as the future of the supermarket business?
I think that there's massive potential there, Stephen, but I also want to urge that the emergence of trends such as technology-based solutions be tempered against the traditional modalities that we have. Because
you want to keep yes.
I'll tell you why. Because it's very easy to get left behind, and the people who are left behind are the people who often need the assistance the most. And I say that both from the experience of a situation we are resolving right now, which I think it's I won't say too much about, but the thing about it is that you have to give people solutions that are convenient, logical, well conceived, well executed, because they're the best planning. Sometimes you roll these things out and you don't consider the peculiarities of the industry, the actors involved, and the impact on the people that it affects. So I really, when I see good things happening, I said, okay, but let's put it in our sandbox.
And let's put it in context, yes.
And let's see, because the peculiarities of something like the banking system versus what the legislation might say versus what the app provider and the technologies, and we need to look at all ends of it. We need to plug and unplug. And that's what we try to do, because you can't take an external provider solution from the United States or United Kingdom and not be cognizant of the norms, attitudes, trends, and prevalences down here.
Certainly, right. And we like to remind our listeners and our viewers that this is the Citizens Community Forum. Stephen Cummings, our topic at this time: factors influencing the food supply chain, response from local supermarkets in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, I'm Stephen Cummings. I'm talking with Mr. Rajiv Diptee, President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Diptee, we have to go to a break in a short while, but before we take that break, I wanted to address this question to you as well, and I think you may have referenced the need for this, have we done any real scientific study on food consumerism, to determine the real socio impact on, for example, the most vulnerable? We've had a situation in the past couple of weeks, was it a week or two that gone by, the famous missing check or checks. Of course, you would you would remember that very vividly, and having to make comments and even issue a press release. Have we really done the kinds of scientific study on food consumerism, and especially the socio-economic impact on the most vulnerable in Trinidad and Tobago?
Stephen, I'm glad that you're asking, because when I speak with people who have to make decisions, often at times they speak from their own experience of what people in their communities may feed back into the loop, but that's not an empirically tested, patternized, data-driven study. And the people that need to undertake those kind of studies are the people at the University of West Indies, Arthur Lockjack School of Business. We partner strongly to try to provide empirical studies, because we feel that those it's something that is, even when you do it from the side of a study, Stephen, getting the data from the participants and the supermarkets is also a bit difficult, because every supermarket is so proprietary about their own intellectual property, as they should be. It's a very competitive industry,
and even patent wherever that might be. Yes.
So the data itself is something that is not as forthcoming, but in my time at the Supermarket Association, it's something that we've become more academic about. So we have touched on the issues with them. Several times we've kind of tested our own food baskets to see how customers would react. And that's how some of these specials come about. When you think you see like the hamper bags on sale, you know, from every crisis, like for example, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right?
Yes.
For example, there was a massive food drive that we did last year when people had run out of savings, because that was when everyone said, you know, listen, we're running out of savings. So we put together that, but we put together a food basket that took into consideration the nutritional information and the dietary requirements of an individual for a few meals, as well as how we could spread the price across a certain portfolio of products to get maybe 2 or 3 days worth of meals and maybe about 9 meals minimum. So they're in a short nutshell, academically speaking, no, none of this time. And I would also extend that to the side of administration. I'm not sure if the Central Statistical Office has something, but that is something.
Well, I'm sure that's something to pursue, whether the CSO has any kind of data or study, because every now and again they are involved in population census and you know, looking at demographics and a whole lot of other things relative to the population of Trinidad and Tobago. But so Diptee, we have to take a short break now, and when we come back, we are going to continue the discussion. We'll be right back. Good evening to you and welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Good evening, my brother, and your viewers, listeners. Happy to be here.
Mr. Cummings, I think you should have to be proud of this civilian oversight.
Mr. Cummings, you were asking about our operational, you were asking about it from an operational standpoint.
First of all, good evening, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me on your program. A very good evening to all of your listeners.
Every Wednesday, join our 1-hour current affairs program, the Citizens Community Forum. Topics are wide-ranging and echoes opinions and voices of our society. Whether it be leadership, governance, health, crime, politics, or social issues, we can all have a civil and constructive discussion inside the Citizens Community Forum every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. on Isaac 98.1 FM with Stephen Cummings.
Last week when I heard that there were 16 children sleeping in the cell in a police station, that was something that was unacceptable to me.
Current constitution of the Public Services Association, there have been concerns about how the constitution...
If you are restructuring the PSA, the only way you can restructure the PSA itself is through constitutional reform.
If the minister does not accede to our request and revalidate this license, we'll have to be headed to court.
Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. Be part of the Citizens Community Forum, a place where we bring to light and discuss critical community, social and national issues, discussions on health, leadership, governance, crime, education and social justice.
We might shift from focusing on whole language approaches to focusing on developing phonemic awareness. So we're just teaching phonics, and then the role of comprehension, the vocabulary development, making sure students can visualize when they read. We're not addressing those needs. So you're right.
And as a matter of fact, I don't know, Stephen, if you know this, but there are some places in the States where the legal drinking age is 21 and not 18. Even though there are persons advocating for our age of consent to be dropped back to 16.
You are dealing with developmental stages of learning. Should it start at the primary, secondary? Where should it start?
Very, very good question.
So there are studies that are being done. The thing about it, Mr. Cummings, let's be honest, how many people really sit and read those studies, or even, I mean, a lot of things are coming in different forms. A lot of the data, a lot of the research is coming in video forms and so on. In our own society, how has research been articulated on this pandemic?
Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m., the Citizens Community Forum. Your host, Stephen Cummings. And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. At this time we are discussing the topic, factors influencing the food supply chain, a response from local supermarkets. And I have with me President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Rajiv Diptee. Mr. Diptee, welcome back.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been a very good show thus far.
All right. We want to continue the discussion, and I want to just make some reference here. There is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in a report I saw said perhaps the single biggest contributing factor to higher food prices is the fact that nearly every industry has been experiencing since the pandemic. You have that issue of labor and the supply of labor. They're saying that there aren't enough workers to, for example, unload containers in ports, for instance, and not enough truck drivers to move the food to distributors and stores. Is this one of the issues in Trinidad and Tobago? Is it all? Are you seeing as well? And I just want to extend that the issue of tariffs. Impacting on the scarcity, for example, of mechanisms that would help to aid in the chain and the distribution supply. Is this one of the problems as well we face in Trinidad and Tobago?
So I'll take the first part of the question. So those exogenous factors such as labor and transportation, they have been part and parcel of the pandemic, and I'll explain why. When COVID-19 took place in the initial part of 2020, many countries, many nations went into lockdowns. This curbed supply in a big way because we had many people sat at home. When the leading nations decided to reopen their economies, be it partially or fully vaccinated, depending on what their levels of fully vaccinated represent, the demand side of the equation exploded because they were now back at work, out and about, and the supply side had also, it was able to meet the initial demand because it was there, but then the supply side dried up, and there was a number of reasons for that also. Many people may not be too familiar with the fact that there was adverse weather conditions throughout the United States, South America, and Africa that affect different things. We had commodities such as cornfields in the United States. They had huge fires. So when that happened,
California, we've been seeing some huge fires, especially in areas of such as California and so on. Yes.
Yeah, and that affects things that is a major input into the production of high fructose corn syrup, which basically goes into everything like jams, jellies, ketchups, or those whole things, right? So the labor side of it now is that it's going to sound fun. It's going to sound weird, but they have actually had to offer more to lorrymen to do transportation. They've had to offer more because other sectors actually picked up and the demand and paid them more. And this was something that was happening in the UK, the US, and Europe. And this was something that was really astounding because when you get to the port, there's not enough people to offload the trucks or load the barge. And that was a problem when you saw how many tens of thousands of containers were standing still in the at the port in Long Island, and that was it was a crazy phenomenon. So,
impacting other countries, not just Trinidad and Tobago.
What some commentators internationally called it is the recalibration of the supply chain, or the supply chain snapped back because literally the sudden reopening of the world's largest economies created a demand situation that is being serviced today but is showing signs slowly of slowing down. We have to remember too on the supply side that when we've had these COVID-19 protocols, such as 50% capacity,
Mm-hmm.
that was also applied to places like factories.
Yes, indeed. So there was a slowing down, yes, and in terms of the production line, yes.
To keep up with the belts of production. So if I'm a producer of 30 lines of product, I prioritized only 15 lines or 20 lines. And to
Because,
focus on
right, because you've been mandated to operate on 50%.
And
Yeah.
so I do, like I said, it's when we do things, we have to think about them logically.
And I did reference, you know, the scientific approach, Mr. Diptee, as to when we do things. But you know, one understands, you know, your trend, you know, of thought and how, you know, we should be looking at that. But you know, I also
I want to get to the second part of your question just before we get into it, which is what can we do from the side of domestic?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at two things. We look at tariffs and we look at the Port Authority, that is the Port of Trinidad and Tobago, where our containers come. Now, I'm not going to be the novel commentator to say that we've had issues with customs and the Port Authority. I do believe that those have been ventilated ad nauseum and that they've really got to get that act together, because we hear too often about the cost of demurrage. We hear too often about how long it takes to move goods off the port. And we have to remember that these are costs that when you pass them back on to people who are importers of goods, and they now understand about those costs, then they're going to pass those costs back on to the value chain, and it's going to have an impact to the end customer. From the side of tariffs, there could always be more done, but then it's a question of revenues for the government, and is it that they're prepared to lose those?
Okay, that's another discussion all by itself. Yes.
It's an entirely different conversation.
Yes,
So, yeah.
indeed. And you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings. We are discussing this evening the business of the factors influencing the food supply chain, a response from local supermarkets. I have with me President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Rajiv Diptee. Mr. Diptee, I want to also touch on what is sometimes, you know, seen as the volatility in the energy market influencing food prices as well, because, you know, we do have a global energy crisis, though we have been seeing some upward spikes in terms of, you know, oil and gas in the more recent times, I suppose, you know, because of the tension that we've been seeing and reading about in the news with, you know, in Russia and the US and Europe. Of course, you know, we've had prices, we've had some spikes in the recent time. Now, also, Dean Foreman, chief economist at the American Petroleum Institute, estimates that energy could account for what he says between 20 and 30% of absolute agriculture costs, and this could be on the food production side. And quoting him, he says, it used to be that energy was a bit of a relief valve for rising prices and expenditures of food, education and healthcare, but not anymore. Is that what you're also sensing as a factor as we talk about the volatility in the energy market?
I think that the energy market, that we are at the we're in the mature phase as a producer of hydrocarbons. We are a primarily based hydrocarbon economy. I think that we have a greater lean on natural gas, perhaps, and on the downstream industries such as methanol, urea, and ammonia, and what that means for those markets, because I think they're doing very well at the moment. I think the real leader in the region is Guyana, and I've seen that their output is set to you know, it's about to take off into a bigger way. What that means for us as, you know, consumers and even retailers is that, you know, we hear about the potential for rates and utilities to be revisited to what we break down to the granular cost of doing business, because there's a base level when you consider the cost of operation in terms of utilities and the minimum wage, which I'm sure will come back onto the agenda, because surely, you know, when the cost of living, or what we call, you know, core inflation, is approaching something that the government needs to look at, then they will, I'm pretty sure that those things come into play. But I think that in a bigger way economically, we're going to see that the world is it operates in cycles, and I know that a lot of people feel like we're not going to get out of this, so this is it. But I mean, I've been hearing that for a long time, from the Clico crash in 2008. That was the end, and then we're still here. Where we've been through quite a lot of cycles, and my opinion and my real hope is that this is another cycle. It will present with many opportunities
as well.
Trinidad needs its leaders to be really on the ball with the resources that we have, with what we feel is dwindling and what we are left with. We must do more with less.
Okay. I've heard that, and I've heard that term, time and time again, doing more we with but again, I touched on the issue there of the volatility in the energy market, because we use energy to drive a lot of our industry, and of course manufacturing is one of those key areas as well, and food production. I want to touch a bit as well on agriculture, Mr. Diptee. Do you believe that we've been doing enough to really bring the agricultural sector at a level where we can say, yes, we are satisfied with where we are in terms of production? I've been monitoring the budgetary allocations given for agriculture for many years, going back to about probably the last 10 years. And we've seen where agriculture has always been given the least in terms of financial budgetary allocation. I think more recently, though, we have had $500 million, which was injected into as a stimulus package. I don't know if we want to call it that, towards seeing that there be some kind of revitalization in agriculture. What is your view on agriculture? And again, touching on this issue of diversification of the economy, because that seems to be also a buzz term, that whenever you talk about diversification, sometimes you automatically think or you hear people talk about agriculture. Are you satisfied with the inputs in agriculture?
It's certainly a buzzword, and I was told recently that some politicians could run a campaign on one buzzword for their entire lifetime. So I'm being edified here as well while learning. So this is my frank thoughts to you, Stephen, and Trinidad and Tobago. I don't believe the government should be in the business of being in that business, quite frankly. What I'm a big proponent of is that I often
not even private partnership.
I'm coming to that part. Coming to that part. Right? So I'm often told that we just don't have the land space for agriculture, and I tell people, I said, let's get in a small aircraft and fly across this island, and I'll show you where that land space is, because we have quite a lot of it. What I'm a big fan of is the private sector pushing with the right initiatives. Private-public partnerships is something that are rooted in well-conceived ventures in partnership with the government. A good example of that was our vaccination drive last year.
Yes.
And
so you were in the forefront of that, in terms of...
and that was something that we conceived, something that we thought out, something that I said, listen, we're going to build on past failures here, and we're going to build on the lessons around us, and we're going to do that. And one of the things that I believe that the private sector can offer is the intellectual capital, the capital intensity required for these projects, because they are capital intensive. It won't be the model of giving a farmer currently 1975 land and saying plant land. We have a lot of that going on here, and that side of the farmers market is adequately covered with the fruits and vegetables that you'll find in such spaces. One example of, so when we take a granular look at the $6 billion that is the import bill, and we started digging into that, and we would have seen that some items made it onto the luxury list last year for the budget.
Yes.
And there were a whole family of raspberries, gooseberries, strawberries, really wood salad at the time. And then I was aware of the Berry Cove initiative. I'm just going to throw this out as an example, in conjunction with the Anson McCall group and the Germans who, did a great job. And they're not actually using arable land. They're using the greenhouse
approach. Yes.
Yeah, and it's great. It's a capital intensive approach, but it works because it gives the consumer the luxury products that they so desire. Gives them far higher quality too than the imported stuff. And it's something that creates import substitution and foreign exchange earners. So
at the same time, yes.
Yeah.
So there's a double benefit in that as well. Yes.
I've often said to the government and indeed the Minister of Agriculture that we are willing to be involved in such projects where an allocation is made of land, and we will conceive the project. We will dig into what it is. But these are
long-term initiatives. But we are also aware of instruments such as Nandepto and other association, even the Agricultural Association. And these are bodies, that can, I suppose, come together with even the Supermarkets Association and come up with some instruments towards treating it. Because we are discussing, how we can impact on our food import bill as well, and the drive towards local production and agriculture. We've been hearing about that for so many years and so many decades. And my question to you was that whether you're satisfied as to where we are, where that is concerned. But certainly you are confident that we can derive the instruments to treat with agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago.
Certainly when you talk about the collaboration between stakeholders, I can tell you that we do have a good working relationship with NAMDEFCO, where we do try for them to do the homework on the gap, the good agricultural practices, to identify those farmers who, when we talk about farmers' produce, we talk about the quality of produce, the reliable supply of that product.
Because one of the issues too, Mr. Diptee, is that thing of supply and production. Even we have that even in when we talk about energy and the oil production, we are certainly below levels, production levels. Do we have that capacity to be able to supply? It's one thing to have the concept and to have all the designs and what have you, but you have to be able to produce at a level so that it makes good economic sense.
Right. So produce at that level that you're talking about, the best manufacturing practices, the best agricultural practice, and the best international best practices need to be in a state of play altogether because a farmer can work hard and a farmer can supply you consistently for a period of time, but a farmer does get tired. We need systems in place that reinforce the processes of production. And when you think about that and you think about what that means, it's going to require some level of investment. And when you talk about the stakeholders coming together, like NAMDEFCO, which is a state entity, and the SATT, which is a private sector organization, you're going to need some level of trust.
Yes.
And in TRUST, the ambition by the government to include, we have often clamored for someone from the supermarket side, from the association, to sit at the level of the board of NAMDEFCO, because we can build stronger interlinkages to create networks and the synergies required.
Right.
If the appetite is not there by the state, then it's not going to happen.
It's not
the appetite is certainly here from our side.
All right, and you're listening to the Citizens Community Forum, also viewing the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and I have with me President of the Trinidad and Tobago Supermarkets Association, Mr. Rajiv Diptee. Our topic this evening, factors influencing the food supply chain, response from local supermarkets. Mr. Diptee, a crisis in economic confidence, could this be another factor impacting food inflation? Because, this could be directly linked to investment, whether local or foreign. And it is, is that a valued argument in your view? Because, clearly a lack of investment brings an increase in potential price pressures,
I agree with you. I mean, Stephen, listen, it's not, that's certainly a comment that I can off the cuff agree with, because we're on the ground. And when you talk about investment and economic confidence, you're looking at basically two indicators. You're looking at foreign direct investment, and you're looking at the appetite for local investment by local businessmen and local actors. And when you see that a lot of them are heading to Guyana, it's going to create confidence. And that's where a lot of the foreign direct investment is actually heading. I see that our local multi-conglomerates are heading there, establishing a base presence and far ahead of it. So,
and it had nothing to do with the locking of the borders, right?
Oh, no. So
this goes pre-2020.
We leave that for another conversation.
Another discussion, yes. Okay, certainly.
So, when we look at the foreign direct investment, it's been absolutely missing, and you need to encourage that. And I think when we talk about the ease of doing business, the EODB, and our ranking as a nation on the corruption index, because it's pretty low. I don't want to be number 88 on a list of 188 countries. It looks terrible. And when we look at people who come into the country and the ease of moving funds between the FIU and all of that, there's a lot of red tape when it comes to the ease of doing business, and it's something that has been institutional since independence. I don't think it's the fault of any one particular administration, but it's something that when I've done some research and really got into it, we've been on this road since independence. We've created institutions and systems within state bodies that have more power than the ministers themselves. Right? So I don't know if the ease of doing business is going to get easier. When we look at local investment, people are certainly risk averse in this environment. We still haven't been sure if we're behind the lockdowns, and certainly from all indicators, from what the taste of Carnival is throwing up, I think we're behind the lockdowns. So now that that's behind, we have to ask what's in front of us. And we have a situation that is a cocktail of price pressures. We have a situation that also includes increasing crime, and that's not going to give anybody confidence to get into new business. We also have people that are classified now as asset rich and cash poor because of the pandemic, and that's a new class of
As you say, as you make mention to that of that as well, Mr. Diptee, there's also a widening gap, or probably the gap has been there for quite some time, of the unbanked, and we have people who just of the view that they don't see value in getting into that kind of investment savings, as it were, or let's just bring it down to the simple man in the street. I mean, you have had the examples of that even with senior citizens, and even the Minister of Finance mentioned in one of his presentations that there is a category of the unbanked in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm looking and I'm wondering whether that's another spin-off when we talk about a crisis in economic confidence.
I agree with you, and I think we need to have respect for those class of persons. As a country that prides itself on being a cultural, cosmopolitan melting pot of different attitudes and values, I think we need to have an appreciation that the value systems of these people, they stay away from the banks. Maybe they don't want to pay an interest rate. Maybe they want to be able to physically access their money when they do. And for whatever reasons, be it religious, cultural, or social, that they choose to remain unbanked. And I think a number of those persons were deeply affected by the $100 changeover from the cotton note to the polymer.
Yes, so that was another issue as well. Yeah.
I heard some stories about people showing up at the central banks with, and the thing about it is that these people, that's their value system. I think we need to have an appreciation of that. From the data that was presented coincidentally by the Ministry of Social Development, I believe that the number of persons that are unbanked in that welfare system is something like 56%.
And that's high. That's quite high. Yes.
And you have to ask yourself why. The banks don't have the greatest reputation for the people that visit them.
That's an indictment, Mr. Diptee.
Well, it's the man on this. I mean, it's like I said, we're on the ground, and that's the feedback of the. If we have a people meter question to go with this interview, I'm pretty sure that they'll tell you what it is.
Okay, that's a very touchy one there in terms of how people view the bank.
To throw it into context, the banks do appreciate the fact that that the pensioners and the welfare check dependents do come to the supermarkets instead of the banks. So I think that speaks volume.
All right. Okay, Mr. Diptee. Diptee, we're almost towards the end of the interview at this time, and just a few moments again before we end. I want to give you the opportunity to give us some closing remarks at this time. 2022, we have had 2 years plus of a pandemic. Some people believe it's not going to end, next week or next month. We're going to have to live with a virus that has, reared its head, since March 2020. What do you see for Trinidad and Tobago, and tying that back into the social fabric and the social sector, people who depend on basic food items? We've referenced, as I said before, at the start of my program, the increasing pressures on prices and food inflation. What do you see for Trinidad and Tobago? What is your hope? Where would you like to see us go in terms of protecting, especially the less fortunate and the vulnerable?
My hope for Trinidad and Tobago is that we can all row in one direction. However, in experience, Stephen, what we see is that this is a place that really thrives on what we colloquially call bacchanal, right? So
I've heard the term that people say that Trinidad and Tobago is not a real place, but that's another discussion.
That's a whole other discussion.
Yes.
But I tend to agree with them at times, depending on what it is. But my feeling, Stephen, is that COVID is going to be with the world and with the people of Trinidad and Tobago for years. And it's going to take not just vaccinations, but you're going to have to live with the virus. It's the same thing that happened with polio, Spanish flu, even SARS-CoV-2 at some point in time. And that those things, as long as you manage the severity and the treatments, and like the vaccination narrative has become stale. It's going to be a case of a few people choosing to get it or not. Whatever that means is that we're going to have to continue to pull out of it. And I think that we need more emotionally sensitive leadership. I think we need our leaders to be talking with the people. We rub shoulders with the customers in the lanes. We're not, we try to keep it real. We let them know what's taking place, what deals are being put out. Lots of the deals that you see being put out by stores is an analysis of what we feel the people do need. So we try very hard to keep the margins on the basics to a minimal point. And I say we at the level of SATT and not every supermarket in the country.
I guess, you make that, you have to make that qualify. Yeah, that's qualifying.
Yeah. You're going to see it. We're going to probably see more margin on the luxury item or the imported stuff, right? But
okay, I'm happy. I'm sure that a lot of people will be happy to hear that. Indeed, yeah.
And the thing about it is that food is something that is a requirement, and I think access to food for everyone is something I feel very strongly about. I'm always doing a food drive. We did one in 2020. We did it twice. We did it twice last year. We already started this year where we fed the homeless. And this is something that I think it's not just about feeding the body, but also feeding the mind. We need to have we have such quality intellectual capital in this country.
Indeed, yes.
Some of the people I have conversations with, and some of the things. And we also have people who can do better in their roles and patterns of behavior and certain things. But Stephen, as you and I are aware, it's really day to day, and we do our best. I from the side of the Supermarket Association, we continue to remain committed to our customers and just providing you with the best. And we're here to get involved. However, I thank you very much for the opportunity on this program. I hope it was engaging.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Diptee, for taking the time to sit with us on the Citizens Community Forum. We have to leave it there at the moment. Our topic this evening, factors influencing the food supply chain, a response from local supermarkets. Mr. Diptee, thank you so much again for joining us on the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to Trinidad and Tobago. Good night.
Indeed. Again, Mr. Rajiv Diptee there, President of the Trinidad and Tobago Supermarkets Association, or the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago, President, and of course we were discussing the topic of factors influencing the food supply chain, a response from local supermarkets. Well, that's our program at this time. I'm Stephen Cummings. See you next Wednesday. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.